Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, developed by Vine and published by Yacht Club Games, and this is a review copy. Just FYI, just telling you that right off the bat. So, this is definitely part of the Shovel Knight games, just based on the look and the sound alone, because seriously, the developer has done a very good job with it. The animations just have that little bit of extra flair that really communicates that Shovel Knight feel. It's using the original soundtracks from the Shovel Knight games, but I believe they've been remixed a bit, and they do a really good job with that as well. And just, there is that little bit of Shovel Knight flair, like secrets to find, and little touches and Easter eggs to figure out in the overworld between runs, at least in the adventure mode. So, yeah, it definitely looks and feels like a Shovel Knight game, but I'll tell ya, it doesn't play like one, because this is a puzzle game, and a relatively interesting take on the genre as well. So, the way that this works is that you're Shovel Knight, you're on this grid, and enemies, obstacles, health potions, keys, chests, and doors are all falling from the sky. And you need to work your way around this grid. Every time you move, the enemies will move too. So it kind of plays like a turn-based Boulder Dash, where you're moving around trying to dig out the enemies and get rid of them in order to keep the grid from filling up. But the enemies can attack you back, so it turns into this strategic game of cleverly moving around the board, trying not to get overwhelmed by the enemy hordes, and making the biggest chains of enemies possible, because the more enemies that you can get into a single chain, the more of them will die at once, and the bigger payoff you'll get in terms of gems. And this gameplay is inherently satisfying, just due to the way the animations work, due to the speed of it, due to how building up these big chains of enemies and then whacking them all and defeating them all at once works. Yeah, there is some inherent satisfaction going on here, and it does make the game very satisfying to play. Especially thanks to the way that the animations work, because they'll be just that little nudge that Shovel Knight gets when he's moving around the spaces, and the way that he whacks the enemies in a really quick animation so that you know that it's happened, but at the same time it doesn't take so long as to interrupt a really quick flow you can get going on. And you can get moving around the map and smacking away at all of the enemies, and it will be inherently satisfying for the majority of the game. And it does help that there are a lot of different kinds of enemies that come about in all the different levels. Whether they be enemies that you have to hit from one direction and then you have to hit from another direction. Enemies that you have to hit and then go and hit something else and come back and hit the first enemy because they'll go invincible between them. Enemies that will shock you every few steps, so you need to be careful about when you hit them. So on and so on and so on. If you're paying close attention to the gameplay in front of you, you'll be able to see a lot of different types of enemies, and you've also got extra weapons that can help you by building up keys and using them to unlock chests. It does a good job at balancing all of these out and making the game itself just a very quick and very enjoyable affair. And it does help that the game rewards you for being as fast as humanly possible by giving you more gems, which is not a score, but is money, whether it be to buy relics from the shop in like little bonus rooms, or whether it be to unlock things outside of the game, excuse me, at least during the in-between sections of the adventure mode. So, it helps. This all helps, and the game is very entertaining, at least for me, for a couple of hours. But I will at least say before I continue on that I've never been the biggest fan of puzzle games, and I don't know if it's me not being the biggest fan of puzzle games that has given me the opinion that I have here. But other than the fact that the base gameplay itself is really satisfying, I find very little reason to want to come back to it after a couple of hours worth of play. Because there's a lot of repetition. Even if you're playing this in the way, like, I don't even know if this is the way it's meant to be played, because they give you a few options. Here I'm playing the mode which is basically, you die once, that's it, you go back to the beginning. But they also give you the option to respawn where you are, but I think it was like without all your gems, and you can give yourself as many lives for this mode as you want. You can also make it so that the game moves faster, everything takes, or you take more damage, the enemies take more damage, things along those lines. And the game gives you like 2 options barely before you've even learned how to play the game properly. And it's like, what exactly am I supposed to pick here? And even after having tried both modes a little bit, I don't know what the game wants me to play. It feels weird because the game does play significantly differently. Your strategy will vary significantly differently if you do so much as give yourself more than one life. But I don't know exactly how the game wants me to play the game itself, especially after it gives me that many options. And it's like you can fiddle around with this anytime in the options menu. And so I don't know if I'm really playing the game that the developers intended me to play or not. But as a result, I end up going into the same stages. I end up fighting the same enemies, or at least very similar enemies. And even if you use like the random stage select option that they give you for when you're playing, when you're playing the adventure mode, it just feels like you're playing a relatively similar game over that space of time. Whether it be because of the level layouts, the enemy layouts, or anything like that. They do make you change up your strategy a little, but it doesn't do much to keep the game from, for me anyway, getting a little bit stale. And it really doesn't help that the game is meant to be something like 25 hours long. An individual run never goes for that long, but the individual runs are just... not the individual runs, but the overall game length, I don't think, at least for me personally, that the gameplay can hold up for that long. And it doesn't help that a couple of bits of the game are a bit weird, like how you need to get 3 keys in order to get into a shrine. And in order to, I'm assuming, get the best ending of the game, you need to get multiple keys. Use those keys to get into the, use those keys to get into shrines. And then those shrines will give you like pieces of the key or pieces of this big key that you need to actually get out of the pocket dungeon. Although the second one does require you to lose 1 max health. I imagine the others will be a little bit different, but you get what I'm trying to say. You need to get through these gates. And if the game just doesn't give you those resources, you're just not going to be able to make it happen. So you're going to have to be saving as much health as possible. You're going to have to be playing as well as possible. And it also doesn't help that you need to visit the individual stages that each have those, whatchamacallits, the gates that give you the key pieces. So you need to play the game from front to back. And the game has a lot of stages. There's like 10 stages overall. So a run can be something like 20 minutes long. And if you're playing for that bloody long, you're going to start to get a little sick of it, especially like I was, considering the amount of planning ahead and strategy you're going to need to do, and the gameplay just doesn't really hold up. It also doesn't help that they do give you these shortcuts you can use to get ahead to a later stage, but you're not going to want to do that because you're denying yourself relics, you're denying yourself extra potential power in order to get through the harder stages, which you're going to want because some of the game's boss fights can be incredibly challenging, which I wouldn't have a problem with if I didn't have to spend 15 minutes getting back to the same boss because I'm trying to get through the story the way the game seems to want me to do it, and it's just making me really bored of the game as a result because I have to fight the same stages, the same enemies, the same just general sequence of gameplay again and again and again and again, and after 2 hours I just find myself thinking, well, this is a bit boring. And it does help for a little bit that they have unlockables, extra relics that you can find in the stages, the shortcuts, the extra costumes, which I still haven't figured out how to put on, by the way. But if you're even a remotely good player, you'll be earning an absolute ton of gems every run. Like, you see here that I've already got something like 20k gems, and I could be spending some of them on, like, relics and what have you, but I'll still be taking a fair few thousand of them out, and you'll find yourself having used up all your opportunities to unlock stuff, and you'll have just gotten everything, and you won't find anything else to unlock or upgrade or what have you. And so you just kind of have to rely on the base gameplay itself to give you that satisfaction. And as I said, I'm not exactly a puzzle game person, so I can't see myself playing this game for much longer than I already have. And that's kind of disappointing, because the base gameplay is good, but for me it just doesn't hold up over time. You do have a couple of extra modes on top of this, of course. You have a daily challenge mode, which is exactly what it says on the tin. Get the highest amount of score possible. There's also a versus mode, and annoyingly, it's not online multiplayer enabled. It's only local multiplayer, but you can play with the CPU, which is nice. But I was playing up to CPU level 7 of 9. Voyager reference. I was playing up to CPU level 7, and if I was fast enough, I could bury the AI in something like 30 seconds. I also had a couple of rounds that would go for a few minutes, but yeah, the AI seems to be, let's say, inconsistent. And so as a result, I find not that much enjoyment out of playing that way either. If you've got a friend, that would probably be the best way to play the game, if I'm being honest with you. But yeah, I got no friends. Just completely forever alone over here. And there is the story, of course, but I'd be lying if I said if there was anything to it to the point that I've gotten to. I've talked to all the characters, and they give you very little to talk about. There's like an Easter egg that you can find in between runs that'll tell you a little bit more about the new Puzzle Knight's family, although it does kind of hint that he's hiding more than he's letting on as part of the story. And then there's like this cloaked figure that you've seen footage of that tells you a little bit about their evil plan, but that's been it for the story for about 2 hours. There's been very little to go on. And so as a result, that kind of just misses as well for me. So yeah, Shovel Knight Puzzle Dungeon. Base gameplay is pretty good, but it doesn't stand the endurance test for me personally, and after 2 hours, I found myself thinking, I don't really want anything to do with this anymore. Not that it's a bad game, I just don't feel like playing it anymore. I tried picking it up again like twice after I recorded the footage that you're seeing to like get a few more extra opinions on it. But after 5 minutes, I just got bored and shut the game down again. I don't know if that's just me. If this sort of gameplay looks appealing to you, then I'd probably recommend you give it a go. Because it's going to be relatively cheap. It's going to be $15. It's going to be on consoles and PC. So you can get it pretty much anywhere you'd want to play it. But the lack of story, the progression coming to a complete halt because of weird gem balancing, the idea that even they don't really know how they want to play their game, and it can result in a bit more either randomness or just general boredom. It all just makes the game a little bit disappointing to me personally, and after a couple of hours with it, I've just found myself thinking, no thanks. Also kind of let down by the lack of online multiplayer for the versus mode, which is probably going to be the best part of the game in the long run. The gameplay is pretty cool. The bosses are pretty cool. The presentation is on point. But yeah, just a couple hours in and I just don't care, which is disappointing. I'm going to shut up and let you watch a little bit more gameplay. This has been Blue Maxima, and I'll see you all next time.